Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a stack of sources, articles, reviews, research notes, and pull out the essential knowledge just for you.
Think of it as getting the key insights and those aha moments without, having to wade through everything yourself.
Exactly. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a book that's, well, really capturing attention right now.
Yeah.
Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson.
And our source material for this deep dive, it comes straight from book descriptions, editorial reviews we were given, customer reviews, and also the author bios provided to us.
Right. And our mission here is to understand what these specific sources reveal about the book's core message, the reporting that apparently went into it, who the authors actually are, and, how it's being received and talked about.
Yeah, and it's really important, especially with a topic like this that's so politically charged, to be super clear. Our role here is just to be impartial. We are simply presenting the viewpoints and information that are contained within these sources we have. We're reporting on what the material says, not endorsing any particular political stance or viewpoint presented in the book or the reviews.
We're just diving into the sources to understand the conversation, the claims around this specific book.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The core claim, right from the book's description itself, it sounds pretty powerful. It's framed as an unflinching and explosive reckoning.
Mm-hmm.
And it focuses on what the authors clearly see as a pivotal, maybe even fateful decision in recent American political history, President Biden deciding to run for re-election.
And according to the sources we have, the book alleges this happened despite what it calls evidence of his serious decline and also desperate efforts to hide the extent of that deterioration.
Wow. And what's fascinating is how the book, again, according to the sources, frames this whole thing. It uses a metaphor, a Greek tragedy.
Yeah, that's right. Where the protagonist tries to avoid their fate, but their very effort is what seals it. The sources say the book applies that idea directly to American politics in 2024.
And the title itself, Original Sin, that refers specifically to that decision, right? Biden choosing to run again.
Correct. The book description says this decision was apparently driven by his deeply held belief that only he could beat Donald Trump.
Okay, and this decision, according to the book's claims in these sources, it led to actions where Biden, his family, and senior aides allegedly, well, they lied to themselves, allies, and the public about his condition and limitations.
It's portrayed as kind of a campaign of denial based on these descriptions.
And the book reportedly points to a really specific moment where the consequences of this alleged deception were just laid bare for everyone. That debate.
The debate with Trump on June 27, 2024, yeah. The book description calls that moment shocking and upsetting.
Which many people would probably agree with just watching it.
Right. And according to the sources, the book's stated goal is to tell the full, unsettling truth from behind closed doors. The authors claim they gathered this from private conversations with what the sources call the heaviest of hitters.
Okay, heaviest hitters. Who did they reportedly talk to? The scope sounds pretty wide.
It does. The sources mention interviews with people from various levels, high to low, White House staff, Congress, cabinet members, governors, donors.
Even Hollywood figures?
Yeah, and even figures in Hollywood, just a broad range of people who supposedly had insights into what was really going on.
So drawing on all these many sources, how does the book, as it's described anyway, interpret Biden's decision to run again? What's the conclusion Tapper and Thompson reportedly reach?
Well, the sources indicate the book views it as shockingly narcissistic, self-delusional, and reckless. Pretty strong words.
Very strong.
It's characterized as a desperate bet that went bust. And critically, it's described as being part of a larger act of extended public deception that has few precedents. I mean, that's quite the language, as presented in the source material we have.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting. The irony the book apparently highlights. The central argument, according to the description, is that by trying to defeat what they saw as an existential threat to democracy, meaning Trump,
Right.
Biden and his inner circle allegedly ensured that threat's return.
That's the reported twist. By denying health issues, by running again, the book claims they doomed the Democrats to defeat.
So the original sin of running again, leading to this alleged campaign of denial and gaslighting, is presented as directly resulting in Trump's return to power.
Yeah, the description we have dramatically states, rarely does hubris meet nemesis more explosively.
Yeah. Okay, so moving beyond that big picture argument, the sources do provide some specific anecdotes and details from the book, right,
Yeah.
to illustrate these points.
They do. And the authors themselves state in their note, according to the reviews anyway, that they interviewed around 200 people, mostly Democrats.
Okay.
And a key detail here is that these interviews were done after the 2024 election,
Ah,
which the authors imply allowed sources to feel, freer to speak openly.
that timing seems crucial, doesn't it? It suggests they might have gotten perspectives people wouldn't have shared publicly or maybe even privately before the outcome was known.
Exactly.
So what are some of these specific instances of alleged decline that the reviewers highlight from the book? What examples jump out from the sources?
Well, several striking examples are mentioned in the reviews we looked at. One goes way back to March 2020 during the campaign.
Okay.
Biden is quoted forgetting parts of the Declaration of Independence, saying, "We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women are created by the the thing."
Right, I remember that clip. You know the thing. That phrase apparently stands out in the book's reporting.
It seems so. Another example cited by a reviewer involves struggles with pre-taped campaign videos, this time back in 2023.
Pre-taped, so not even live.
Right. A source involved is quoted in the book saying the man could not speak. It wasn't his stutter. It was his inability to find words, to remember what he was saying, to stay on one train of thought. That sounds like a very specific kind of behind-the-scenes observation.
Definitely. What about public appearances? Did any of those reportedly raise concerns that are mentioned in the book?
Yeah, the 2024 D-Day Memorial Ceremony is brought up in one review. According to that review, the book recounts how attendees allegedly commented that Biden appeared frailer than some of the veterans present,
Wow.
many of whom were nearly 100 years old.
That's a stark comparison. There's also a really fascinating anecdote involving George Clooney that reviewers mention.
That's right. According to the review from the presidential historian Konstantinos E. Skeros, the book claims that at a fundraiser organized by his longtime friend George Clooney, this was in California in June, right before the debate, Biden seemed not to recognize Clooney during a conversation.
Didn't recognize George Clooney.
Apparently not, according to this account in the book. And the reviewer connects this specific incident to Clooney's later op-ed in the Washington Post, the one defending Biden's capabilities. The implication, as the reviewer presents it, is the book suggests Clooney was maybe reacting to this very moment.
Wow, that's a detail that certainly makes you pause. What about the internal dynamics described? Any key interactions or relationships highlighted in the sources we have?
Yeah, the sources touch on a few moments that sound quite telling. After that June 27th debate, according to a reviewer recounting the book's contents,
Yeah.
then First Lady Jill Biden's reaction is described as being like a kindergarten teacher complimenting her student.
Who?
She's reportedly quoted saying things like, "Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts," which the reviewer implies the book portrays as, well, maybe a minimizing or overly positive spin.
Yeah, that framing definitely speaks volumes, according to that reviewer's take on the book. What about Vice President Kamala Harris? What does the book reportedly say about her reaction or any conversations?
Well, the book reportedly includes a conversation between Biden and Harris when he told her he was dropping out.
Okay.
She's quoted asking, "Are you sure you want to do this? Don't let them push you out, Joe." And Biden's reported reply was, "I feel like I have to do this. I want you to do it. If you want to do it, are you up for it, kid?"
Kid.
Well,
Interesting.
Yeah.
This exchange, as presented by the reviewer Scaros anyway, seems to paint a picture of maybe genuine loyalty and concern from Harris in that moment.
The sources also mention an alleged break between the Bidens and Michelle Obama. That seems like a pretty significant detail if it's in the book.
It is a detail brought up by that presidential historian reviewer, Scaros. He notes that the book reportedly describes a break between Michelle Obama and the Bidens that happened amid Hunter Biden's difficult marriage to his then-wife, Kathleen.
Oh, right. Who was apparently a good friend of Michelle's. And the reviewer adds that, according to the book, this led to Michelle Obama overtly avoiding attending events with her husband when he was present if they involved the Bidens.
Really?
Yeah. Now, the reviewer includes his own speculation about other events Michelle didn't attend, but the key point from the book, as reported, is this break linked to Hunter's marriage issues.
Okay. It seems the book also points a specific finger of blame for letting the situation develop, or at least presenting it in a certain way.
Yes, the sources definitely suggest the authors implicitly blame Biden's inner circle throughout the book. They reportedly portray this group as responsible for what they call the smoke and mirrors presentation to the public.
Smoke and mirrors.
One reviewer, kind of echoing the book's likely sentiment, even uses the disparaging term Politburo for this group.
Politburo. Wow. And who does that group reportedly include, according to the sources?
According to the sources, it reportedly includes key advisors like Mike Donnellan, Bruce Reed, Steve Ricchetti, Ron Klain, Anthony Bernal,
The usual suspects, maybe.
along with his wife Jill and son Hunter. The book's argument, as summarized by reviewers, is basically that this group did a disservice by allegedly sugarcoating Biden's chances and prolonging his time in the race, which ultimately hindered a smoother transition or maybe prevented one altogether.
Okay, so the book presents a very, very critical narrative, supported by these reported anecdotes and quotes. But the authors themselves, Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, they include an author's note where they apparently address their own perspective and add some nuance. What do the sources say about that note?
Right, this is where we get a clearer sense of their stated intention, at least based on the reviews. The authors explicitly state, according to the sources, that the book is not meant to support the view that Biden was, a husk from the very beginning, barely able to function.
Okay, so not that extreme. But it doesn't claim he was perfectly fine throughout either, does it?
Yeah, correct. They state, according to the sources, that the book also won't satisfy people who believed rumors of his deterioration were simply right-wing propaganda. Their conclusion, as presented in the reviews, is actually more specific.
How so?
They reportedly conclude Biden was in serious cognitive decline, but specifically affecting his ability for performative presidential tasks.
Performative tasks, like speaking clearly in public, that kind of thing.
Exactly, like speaking clearly and coherently in public. But, and this is the nuance, they also say he still had his wits about him for important decisions.
Oh, interesting distinction.
Yes, that's a reported nuance. The authors, according to the sources, state he still had his wits about him to make important decisions, while at the same time acknowledging the crucial importance of those performative, public-facing aspects of the presidency.
Right, because that's what people see.
Exactly. So it's not presented as a total condemnation of his decision-making capacity, but a really focused criticism of his public presentation and his ability to perform the visible duties of the office as they reportedly deteriorated.
That distinction seems really key to understanding the book's specific argument. And the authors also reportedly made clear the book isn't meant to just, let Biden's political opponents off the hook either.
Precisely. According to the sources, Tapper and Thompson explicitly state the book is not an exoneration of the candidacy or presidencies of Biden's opponent, Donald Trump.
Okay.
They emphasize that their reporting on Biden does not excuse actions by others, including the 45th and now 47th president.
Do the sources give an example of this balance within the book? How they handle Trump?
Yes, actually. The presidential historian reviewer Scaros, he notes that the authors reportedly can't resist a few swipes at Trump.
Uh-huh.
As an example, he mentions the book pointing out that shortly after Biden pardoned Hunter, Trump pardoned January 6 convicts. So this suggests the book does include some critical comparisons or observations about both sides, according to this reviewer's reading.
Got it. Beyond the immediate political figures, the sources say the book tries to connect this story to broader, more universal themes.
Yes, the authors reportedly state the book speaks to these sort of timeless questions about human behavior and group dynamics. Things like cognitive dissonance, groupthink, courage, cowardice, patriotism.
I'm trying to put it in a bigger context.
Exactly. They seem to be trying to place this specific political event within a larger human context.
And they use a pretty powerful quote from George Orwell to frame this idea, don't they?
They do. According to the sources, they quote Orwell saying, we are all capable of believing things which we know to be untrue, and then, when we are finally proved wrong, impudently twisting the facts so as to show that we were right.
Oof. That hits hard.
Yeah. And Orwell wrote about the difficulty of seeing what is in front of one's nose, and the authors reportedly state their book is precisely about what was in front of our noses.
That really links the specific, maybe painful political events the book describes to a more fundamental human challenge, just the difficulty of facing and accepting reality, especially when it's uncomfortable or contradicts what we want to believe.
It definitely seems intended to elevate the story beyond just political gossip to something more like a human drama, at least in the way the authors frame it, according to the sources.
Okay, so now what about the reception?
Mhm.
What do the critics and readers actually say about the book? The sources provide a real range of reactions, right?
They do. Looking at the editorial reviews provided, the language used to describe the book is quite strong, almost explosive, you could say.
Yeah. I saw words like explosive from the New York Times, superbly reported from the LA Times.
Most significant book to date about Biden's cognitive decline from the Atlantic. Other descriptions include autopsy report, also the Atlantic damning that was used by the New York Times, Washington Post, and Chris Cillizza.
So damning was popular.
Seems so. Indictment from Kirkus, comprehensively sourced from the New Statesman, and authoritative, also Kirkus. And Politico is quoted saying the book has shifted the political dial to this extent in recent years.
Yeah.
So these reviews, as presented in our sources, are clearly highlighting the book's perceived significance and its impact right out of the gate.
Those are certainly powerful endorsements from major publications.
Huh.
What about the customer reviews we have access to? Do they sort of echo this positive sentiment, or do they present a different picture?
Well, we have several detailed customer reviews that definitely provide a spectrum of reactions. Konstantinos E. Skaros, the presidential historian whose review we mentioned a couple of times,
Right.
he gives the book a 5-star rating, which is interesting because he also points out flaws, like what he calls excessive profanity and a writing style he describes as one-word sentences for effect.
Huh. Okay, so despite stylistic issues, the substance must have resonated strongly for him.
It really seems so. He calls it an original and thorough review and finds it rather even-handed, even though he assumes the authors likely lean against Trump. He agrees with the evidence presented in the book pointing to decline since 2020, confirms key anecdotes match his own understanding, and he places the blame squarely on that inner circle.
The Politburo.
Reinforcing that term, yeah. He also notes the author's specific critical mentions, those swipes, at Trump's actions, and ultimately he agrees with the author's nuanced conclusion about Biden's cognitive state. So top rating, despite the quibbles.
Okay. We also have a review from someone who identifies as an anti-Trump Democrat. What was their take?
That's Deb Miller, and she also gives the book 5 stars. She calls it an important read that provides a thorough behind-the-scenes look. She says it fills in the blanks to what we were witnessing but tried to look away from, and agrees Biden was too old and frail. Like Skaros, she places the lion's share of the blame on his inner circle, and importantly, on Biden himself, too.
Right.
She describes the book as painful to read but important, and expresses a wish that Biden had chosen to be a transitional president to preserve his legacy. She recommends the book for understanding how it happened.
It's really interesting that from these different perspectives, a historian and a self-described Democrat, these reviewers found the book's reporting and core argument compelling, even if it was, as she said, painful to confront.
That seems to be the case for these specific reviews, yes. However, we also have a critical review from Greg Askew, who gives it just 1 star. A very different perspective.
Okay, 1 star. And his viewpoint is quite different from the others we've discussed, I imagine.
Oh, completely. His review title is pretty telling. The difficult truth is sometimes easier to avoid. He views the book's focus as basically a diversion from what he considers the difficult truth, which in his view is that Trump won the election and the Democratic Party is fundamentally unpopular.
Ah, okay. So shifting the blame, or the focus, rather.
Right. And he backs this up with specific election statistics presented in his review. He cites Trump's reported vote percentages among demographics like married men, men aged 45-64. His win rate in counties 86%, he says. And he notes that Harris received 6 million fewer votes in 2024 than Biden did in 2020, despite significant campaign spending.
So he's attributing the election outcome to much broader party issues and voter preferences, not primarily to Biden's health or some alleged cover-up.
Exactly. He criticizes what he sees as the Democrats' misplaced focus on things like the January 6th investigation. He points to the age of Democrats in Congress mentioning 15% or over 70.
Okay.
And he highlights issues in Democrat-led cities like crime, homelessness, financial deficits, arguing these present an unappealing vision to voters. He also contends that for anyone who voted for a candidate over 70, expressing surprise about health decline after the fact is, in his words, not credible.
Implying voters should have known the risks, essentially.
That seems to be his point, suggesting voters should have managed their own expectations. So yeah, Askew's review sees the book as focusing on the wrong issue entirely. He argues the election outcome was determined by deeper political currents and the voters' choices, not this specific narrative of Biden's decline and an alleged cover-up.
That's the core of his argument as presented in that review.
Okay.
And we also have brief mentions of a couple of international reviews.
Just briefly, yeah. Vincent Mercadante from Canada gives it 5 stars, reportedly focusing on the physical condition aspects presented in the book. And Steve G. from the UK gives it 4 stars. He calls it a pacey read and well-researched.
And does he agree with the core premise?
He seems to. He echoes the sentiment that it was gaslighting, lies, and a desire to hang on to office. He believes aides and family ultimately tarnished the legacy of someone he calls a fundamentally decent man,
Hmm.
and believes they ended up guaranteeing Trump's return by holding on to the belief that only Biden could prevent it.
So, looking across all these sources, the editorial snippets, the detailed customer reviews, we see a picture of a book that is widely seen as significant, maybe even explosive, and well reported by many, including some who are critical of Trump or identify as Democrats.
Right. But it also clearly sparks very different reactions. Some find its core thesis compelling, maybe even necessary, while others dismiss it as missing the real reasons behind the election outcome, depending heavily on their own political perspective, it seems.
Yeah. And that customer rating overall reflects that division, doesn't it? 3.9 out of 5 stars, based on the 57 global ratings in our source.
Exactly. The breakdown shows a lot at the high end, 59% 5-star, 15% 4-star, but also a notable chunk at the low end, 18% 1-star, with fewer ratings in the middle. It clearly reflects a polarized but maybe leaning positive reception among this specific group of reviewers who provided ratings.
Okay. To fully understand the context of this book and why it's generating so much buzz, it definitely helps to know a bit about the authors themselves. Who are Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, based on the information we have in the sources?
Let's start with Jake Tapper. According to his bio, he's obviously a very prominent figure in American journalism, especially at CNN. He's described as the lead D.C. anchor and chief Washington correspondent.
Anchoring the lead in State of the Union.
Right. The lead since 2013, State of the Union since 2015, and he also became CNN's lead anchor for coverage of major D.C. events back in 2021. So a very visible presence.
And he's been covering national politics for a long time. Has his work been recognized?
Yes.
Awards and such?
Oh, yes. He's an Emmy award-winning journalist. His reporting, particularly on the 2016 election, earned him multiple awards. The Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Television Political Journalism, awards from the LA Press Club and RTDNA, and even a tribute from the Canadian Journalism Foundation.
And he's not just a broadcast journalist, is he? He's also pretty prolific author across different genres.
That's right. He's written several nonfiction books. One really notable one is The Outpost. That was a bestseller, later adapted into a critically acclaimed film in 2020.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And Tapper was an executive producer on the film. He also wrote Down and Dirty, The Plot to Steal the Presidency, and Body Slam, the Jesse Ventura story.
Wow, quite a range. And he writes fiction, too. Novels.
Yes. He's also a New York Times bestselling novelist. His novels include The Hellfire Club, The Devil May Dance, and All the Demons Are Here, which came out in July 2023.
So he brings a background not only in deep reporting, but also in narrative storytelling, which probably informs this book.
You'd imagine so. He seems to have a wide range as a writer. His personal background, according to the bio, he's a native of Philadelphia, graduated Phi Beta Kappa, magna cum laude from Dartmouth, lives in D.C. with his wife, daughter, son, and quite a few pets, 3 dogs and a cat.
Huh. Okay, that's Jake Tapper. Now let's look at Alex Thompson. What does his bio tell us?
Alex Thompson is currently a national political correspondent for Axios, and he's also a CNN contributor.
So we see him on TV, too.
Yeah.
And he's also received recognition for his political reporting, specifically on Biden, right?
Yes, exactly. He received a White House Correspondents Association Award just in 2024 for overall excellence in White House coverage, specifically for his reporting on Joe Biden.
Very relevant.
Extremely relevant. Before Axios, he was notable for creating Politico's West Wing Playbook newsletter, which is quite influential. And he also worked at the New York Times and Vice News.
So he has a strong, very recent background, focused heavily on covering the White House beat, day-to-day politics in D.C. Where did he study?
He's a graduate of Harvard, also lives in D.C., and his bio includes a little fun personal touch.
Yeah.
It notes he has no pets, unlike Tapper's menagerie, but is described as a proud uncle.
That's a nice little detail. Their combined experience, then, especially their deep roots in D.C., covering high-level politics, the White House specifically, that clearly provides the foundation for the reporting in this book, drawing on those connections and access points they must have.
Absolutely. You've got Tapper's decades covering the political scene and his experience in deep dive nonfiction, combined with Thompson's very recent award-winning focus on White House coverage. It's a potent combination for this kind of project.
Okay. For those who've listened to this deep dive and are maybe interested in checking out the book for themselves, what are the key publication details we have from the sources?
Right. The book is titled Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. The publisher is Penguin Press.
And it came out very recently, May 20, 2025, according to the sources.
That's right. It's available as a hardcover. Reported print length is 352 pages.
Okay.
The ISBN 13, if you need it, is 979-821-70-6060672. And the Amazon source provided some physical details. Dimensions are 6.4 by 1.08 by 9.52 inches, and it weighs about 1.2 pounds.
Good to know if you're ordering it.
Yeah.
We mentioned the customer rating earlier. As of our sources, it's 3.9 out of 5 stars based on those 57 global ratings.
And its current ranking on Amazon really highlights its immediate impact. It was listed as #3 in books overall, #1 in categories like United States national government, #1 in political corruption and misconduct, and #1 in United States executive government.
So yeah, it has definitely landed squarely in the center of the political discussion right now.
No question.
Okay, so we've taken that stack of sources, book descriptions, reviews, author bios, and done our deep dive into what they reveal about Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson's book, Original Sin.
Yeah, we've explored the book's central, pretty controversial claims about President Biden's alleged decline and the purported cover-up by his inner circle, all as reported by the authors based on their sources.
And we've pulled out some of the specific, sometimes really surprising, details and anecdotes the book reportedly includes. We looked at the internal dynamics described and discussed the author's stated nuanced perspective on Biden's condition and maybe their motivations for writing the book.
We've also synthesized the range of reactions presented in the editorial and customer reviews we had. Seeing how the book is being perceived, from those who see it as a crucial, well-reported account of a pivotal moment, to those who view it as maybe a distraction from other key political issues, depending heavily on their perspective.
And we touched on the author's significant journalistic background and the book's key publication details.
And our aim throughout this deep dive has just been to act as your guides through this specific stack of material. We've presented the information and viewpoints contained within these sources, offering you a shortcut to understanding the claims and the conversations surrounding this book.
Doing our best to remain impartial and just report on what the sources actually say.
Exactly. So, wrapping this up, the book and the reactions to it, as we've seen in these sources, they kind of bring us back to that George Orwell quote. The authors reportedly use that struggle to see what is in front of one's nose.
Right.
In today's world, flooded with information, conflicting narratives, deeply entrenched political viewpoints, how do you discern what is truly in front of your nose?
That's the question. And what is the individual and maybe collective responsibility when faced with difficult realities, especially concerning those in the highest positions of power,
Right.
regardless of their political affiliation or yours?
It's a challenging question, definitely, and one that this book, based purely on our sources today, seems to force you to confront.